Is Robin Shapiro. Good evening, Ms. Shapiro. Will you be offering factual testimony or just opinion?
No, there is some fact in there, so.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please have a seat.
Good evening, Senator McDonald, Representative Lawler, members of the Judiciary Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony concerning the reappointment of judges. On a Sunday night in October 2007, my husband's abuse took a dangerous turn and the violence was directed against my oldest child. While my 10-year-old screamed for him to stop, my oldest daughter tried to protect me. My husband hit her, kicked her, and sent her flying across the room, all 100 pounds of her. I had taken his abuse for years, but now he had struck my child and the abuse had to stop here. We didn't realize it then, but we were going to be another family caught up in the cycle of domestic violence, and worse, in the throes of a court system that just doesn't have a clear understanding. In my case, my husband assaulted his sister, his stepdaughter, myself, and then 2 other women. He was arrested 5 times with me alone between October 2007 and April 2008. He previously took anger management, was refused family violence, and sent to the Evolve program more than once. Each time he was issued a protective order requiring him to be 100 yards away and have no contact. In 4 of those arrests and multiple hearings after, he appeared before the same judge, Judge Karen Nash-Sakino, in Derby. Each time she reminded him not to do it again, to abide by the protective order and have no contact. Each time, we were back again. He repeated the offense. My oldest daughter was on the protective order. Physical neglect was substantiated with my son, and Judge Sakino still would not protect my 10-year-old and put her on the order because she was his biological daughter and he hadn't hit her yet. I had to go to civil court and go before another judge to get a restraining order to protect her. I told her what he had done, how he had punched me, how he had chased me, how he sat just over the 100 yards and watched my house. He watched my job. I told her how he said he would leave me dead on my front lawn for my children to find. She said he had rights, he always came to court, and he attended his classes. There was no actual contact performed, no entering the dwelling to warrant any higher bond. 4 arrests within 1 month for violating the protective order. I didn't want him to follow through with his threats, and I didn't want to die. And I asked Judge Sakino, and she told me to use my resources. Wasn't she my resource? I called the police. I had protective orders, restraining orders. I filed for divorce, but the criminal justice system was not protecting us. Finally, I was given a standing criminal restraining order. Ultimately, he violated that too. In May of 2009, we were cornered exactly where he said I would die, on my front lawn. He ran and hid for 3 weeks. His cases were combined, and he served 6 months, again before Judge Sakino. The judge did not have a clear understanding of what the protective order was for. She seemed caught up on the no contact part. It also says no threatening, no harassing, and no stalking. And I wasn't going to allow him to hit me again or hurt my child to satisfy the court's misinterpretation of the order. I'm speaking out today not because Judge Sakino is a bad judge. I just don't think she and others like her fully understand the cycle of abuse or the mindset of the abuser. Judges need to be educated on the patterns of abuse. They need to act and act quickly and know that they have the power and the duty to protect those who can't protect themselves. We need to have courts that specialize in domestic violence crimes and judges that are educated on the issue. They need to understand that just because the order states no contact, it doesn't necessitate another physical contact. Protective and restraining orders need to be fully enforced. Judges need to follow through with punishments and hold the abusers accountable for any violation. After all, it's not just a violation of a protective or a restraining order. It's a violation of a court order, a judge's court order. Educate the judges, change the courts, and send a clear message that domestic violence will not be tolerated on any level. We need to break the cycle of abuse, and you are our resource, and we need your help. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shapiro. Representative,
taking the time to come here today and to tell us your story. When I see the last part of your statement, it mirrors a lot of what we've gone through over the last few months in the Domestic Violence Task Force that the Legislature has been working on in a bipartisan manner in the report that we issued last week or a week and a half ago. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Was there a domestic violence docket in the court where you where you were?
I don't believe there was. During one of the hearings, Kevin Dunn was actually in the courtroom and present when some of this discussion went back and forth. He ended up taking over the case, and he was the prosecutor that ended up handling it ultimately. So luckily, I did have someone who knew about the domestic violence issue and knew about the cycle, and still, it still ended up with the same result, just keep getting released and sent back out.
Okay, because that's one of the things that we're looking at, because as it stands now, there's, out of the 22 GAs, criminal courts, there's only 7 full domestic violence dockets, and then there's 2 semi, and then the rest, manage on their own. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we're looking at to see is if there's a way that we can maybe expand that, because a lot of what you're talking about are the things that we're looking to address during this upcoming session.
It's definitely something that needs to be done. It's not the same type of a crime as the other one, so it does need to be handled a little bit differently. I mean, in reality, a protective order and a restraining order, it's a piece of paper unless it's enforced. So we need the judges to enforce it. If they're going to give it to us, they have to hold them accountable for what they do.
Well, stay tuned to what we're working on this session.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Kissel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Shapiro, I have got to commend you for, A, being so patient today, to be here now over 6 hours, and also being brave enough to come and talk about an incident like this, because a lot of folks that are the victims of domestic abuse, it's a really scary situation, and the fact that you have children adds to that. The other thing that I note, and I have a question as well, but the other thing that I note is it does not appear that you're necessarily saying that we should not confirm the renomination of Judge Nash Sakino, but that you had this incident, you want to raise it to our attention so that we're all sensitive to it, and that even though you don't agree with how that all took place and that you feel that the judge made an incorrect determination given that factual sequence, that going forward we all can learn from that experience. Am I reading your testimony correctly?
Exactly. This is just to show one incident, what happened, and just bring to light some things that need to be changed so that it doesn't happen again. And so that maybe the judge will also know where things need to be adjusted for the next case that she hears.
And again, that's just an incredibly great approach to this situation. For all those folks that might be home watching this on the CT network, for all the judges and policymakers here in this building, that is a great message. And there's a lot of people that feel that they were wronged by the system or the system that didn't treat them fairly. And and I can't even say that it's bad that they might carry a grudge, but you've taken such a high road in this. I'm just overwhelmed by your testimony. The last question is just more on a personal note. Has this individual now left your life and your children's life, and do you feel relatively safe and secure right now? Is this behind you?
I'd like to say it is. It's getting there. My daughter is now, the youngest one is now almost 13, and she's finally sleeping in her own room as of December of 2009. It took that long for her to feel safe enough in her own house. He was released from jail this last time on December 2nd on a Wednesday. 2 days later, he drove past our house again. The only reason I didn't call the police is because you have to prove everything. It seemed like in order to, I couldn't just call the police and say, gee, I saw him again. What was he driving? Who was he with? It was a passing drive just to let me know that he's still out there, and I didn't give too much rise to it, but I did call the probation officer. They were not aware of all of the incidences prior, so I did let her know that he drove by. This is the last time that this is going to be let go now. You have to take this seriously. And she informed him clearly that he is not to come anywhere near us.
And this is just this last December?
This is just this past December, 2 days after he was released the last time.
Well, the other part that you just testified to that I find is a bit problematic is that that probation officer should have had all that information at their fingertips.
They didn't know he wasn't living in the house he was supposed to be living in. They didn't know he wasn't working. They didn't know that he had been arrested for another woman. They didn't know about the second girlfriend. They didn't know any of this. They just weren't on top of it. There's not enough, maybe there's not enough manpower. I don't know. But unless Part of the problem is they ask the victims to come up and speak, and then they listen to you, they thank you for speaking, and then they send you back out the door with this person. Now they know you've told everything. And again, it just puts you back in that same situation.
Well, that's part of our governmental learning curve. I'm looking forward to the recommendations that the task force is moving forward with. One of the things that we found at the bottom of, the Cheshire homicides and the De Britton murder and everything else like that is as I always hearken back to when we had that panel come before us, they said it was a lack of communication, and what we're working on is trying to create a seamless connectivity between time of arrest and the ultimate disposition and everything in between so that all the decision makers can make the most informed decision possible. And again, I really commend you for coming and bringing your story to us. We can't be told enough about this. It's very important that we get reinforced, and it may not even just come down to manpower or dollars. This is just one hand knowing what the other hand is doing, and that's something that we can solve if we pay attention to it. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Representative Lawler.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and also thank you for coming and participating today. And I just want to extend an invitation to you. As you heard from Representative Fox, in a few weeks we'll be considering some bills dealing exactly with the very things you've been describing here today, frustrations that people have that the system just doesn't seem to work. Mm-hmm. I think everyone's motives are the best, but there are some gaps, there are some loopholes, there are some flaws, and I think there's actually a lack of understanding on the part of a lot of people who work in the system. And so your story is very compelling, and a lot of people would want to hear it even a second time. So if you want to stay in touch with our committee staff, check back in a week or so. We could probably give you the date of that hearing, and you're more than welcome to come back and tell your story. And you'll be joined by quite a few other people telling a similar story. And it's the collective voice that will help change policy, change the rules, and change the attitudes throughout our criminal justice system. And as you pointed out in your one case in point, these changes are very necessary, and it's our obligation to make sure they happen. So thanks for coming today and participating.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Is there anything further? Representative Labriola in front of Representative Berry's. There you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple questions. I'm trying to figure out, it looks like from your testimony that he eventually did 6 months for the violation of the protective order, or did he do 90 days of the 6 months? Is that what happened?
Okay. The first time he was put in on a 2.5-year cap and only had to serve 90 days. The second time, he was actually put in for 6 months on one of the other victims, and then the 6 months for violating the order for coming to my house ran along with that. So he served a total of 9 months, I guess, total altogether.
Okay, so he did eventually get sentenced to jail for the crimes that he committed. And I'm just curious, in addition to your experience in court, how about dealing with the police departments? How was that? And how about with the prosecutor's office in court? How was your experience with them?
Ansonia Police Department was amazing. They were great. Every single officer we dealt with. They were very attentive with the children. They made sure that they spoke with them, that they made sure that they were safe. We had one officer that had come out. He would sit, the protective order states 100 yards. So where our house is located, the next street up put him at 100 yards and like 13 feet. And he would sit there every day. And he would sit there at night. But he wasn't within the 100 yards. And because stalking hadn't been mentioned in one of the first 2, 3, 4 police reports, they couldn't really get him on the stalking until they got him in stalking as part of another arrest. So the officers would sit there and try to measure it out and see if they can get him. One officer spent 3 days trying to figure out if at any point was he within the 100 yards. He knew just where his boundaries were. They were great. The police department was great. The prosecutor's office, the victim's advocate's office, they all went above and beyond. It was just when they went for the warrants or they went for the next step, because there wasn't that next physical contact, we sort of got hung up. They didn't, the stalking, the harassing, the phone calls, where I worked, he would sit in the next parking lot over, but he was enough away so that we knew he was there, And, my boss gave a statement, the other girl I worked with gave a statement, so it wasn't that I was the only one seeing them. The night he came to our house and sat in front at 2:40 in the morning, the neighbors gave testimony that they saw him. But because he didn't come back in the house again, because he didn't go after anybody and hit anybody again, we got caught up on that. So the rest of the order was never enforced. And then when they ultimately put him in, they would just put him in on violating conditions of release. It was the same thing. But every time he came in, it was don't do it again, but then he was back. And then it was don't do it again. I can't parent my child that way. They don't learn. So to teach him not to do it again by just reminding him not to do it again wasn't getting us anywhere.
Is there anything further? If not, let me repeat what others have said, and thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Next is Stephen Erickson.